Okay, let's continue in section 9.5. This is for the discriminant in the quadratic formula. So the discriminant is the expression that's underneath the square root. And really the point of the discriminant tells us how many solutions or x-intercepts our equation is going to have. So if our discriminant is positive, that means that it's going to cross the x-axis 2 times and gives us 2 solutions and 2 x-intercepts. If the discriminant is 0, then it's really only going to touch the x-intercept 1 time, giving us 1 solution. And then if the discriminant is negative, that means it's never going to cross the x-axis, giving us no solution. So we're going to look at the monitoring progress questions that go along with example 3. If you want to look over example 3 real quick first, that's fine. And let's go down here to these monitoring progress questions. So here I just kind of wrote down some notes. If you want to take a second to kind of copy down what I have here, I just summarized what I just said. The discriminant is the expression under the radical. It tells us the number of solutions. And if it's positive, 0, or negative, it gives us 2, 1, or no solutions or x-intercepts. Okay, let's talk about number 7. We're going to do monitoring progress number 7. And I'm getting this from the textbook in section 9.5. So I wrote down number 7 here. This is the opposite of x squared minus 4x minus 4 equals 0. Okay, just be careful. Notice how the equation is equal to 0. The same rules apply with the quadratic formula. You must have the equation equal to 0 first. If the equation is not equal to 0, then you need to get it equal to 0 before you start to solve the equation. Okay, so this one is, we're good to go. Let's identify our A, B, and C, and we're gonna plug this into our formula for the discriminant, which is D equals B squared minus 4AC. So there's no square root, it's the expression under the square root. So just the B squared minus 4AC. Let's plug our numbers in. So we're going to have 4 squared minus 4 times our A is negative 1 times our C is negative 4. Let's simplify. I get 16. This is negative, negative, negative. So it's going to end up being negative. 4 times 1 times 4 is 16. And we get a discriminant of 0. So when our discriminant is 0, that means that our graph is only going to give us 1 solution. Remember, this is the number that's under the radical. So our next step, if I were doing the quadratic formula, would be to square root 0. But there's only 1 square root of 0. So that's why this only has 1 solution. Okay, let's do another one like this. We are going to look at number 8. So we have 6x squared plus 2x equals negative 1. Notice how in this equation it's not equal to 0 first. That needs to be our first step. Let's get it equal to 0, then we can plug it into the formula. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. We get 6x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Now we're ready to plug it into our quadratic formula. Here's our A, B, and C. The discriminant formula. Let's plug it in and find the discriminant. So we're going to just do B squared minus 4AC. That's the formula we're using for the discriminant. So we want 2 squared minus 4 times our A, which is 6, times our C, which is 1. Let's simplify. I get 4, then negative 4 times 6 times 1, that's negative 24. And when I subtract here, I get negative 20. Now, since our discriminant is negative, think about what this is. This is the expression under the radical. So if I were to try to square root negative 20, I couldn't because I cannot take the square root of a negative number. That means that this has no solution. Okay, we're going to look at another variation of this question. It's really the same idea, except they just changed the wording around. So this is going with example 4, finding the number of x-intercepts. So you do the same thing. You still do the discriminant, except you just say how many x-intercepts instead of how many solutions. So I'm going to go down here to these monitoring progress questions, and we're gonna do monitoring progress number 11. So let me just copy this down. This is number 11. Y equals x squared minus x. Okay, the first thing that we want to do, because we're finding the x-intercepts on the graph happen when y is equal to 0. So that needs to be our first step. We're going to take 0 and we're going to plug it into our equation for y. So we want 0 equals x squared minus x. Let's identify our a, b, and c. So our a is really 1, our b is really -1, and there is no c here at the end, so our c is really 0. Let's plug it in to find our discriminant, and we're still going to do the discriminant formula, b squared minus 4ac. Let's plug it in. So we want d equals, our b is -1 squared minus 4 times 1 times 0. We're going to simplify. -1 squared is +1, and then -4 times 1 times 0 is just 0. So 1 minus 0, I get 1. Since our discriminant is positive, that means that when I take the square root of this, the square root of 1 has two answers. It's 1 and -1. So that means this has two solutions, but in this case, we're going to say 2 x-intercepts, because that's what the question asked us. How many x-intercepts does it have? It has 2 x-intercepts because our discriminant was positive.